I began the last video emphasizing this crozier from Honduras and the pastoral comments that I was making, particularly leaders who are living in the midst of the high stress of this moment. A part of the challenge of this time together as leaders is not only do we have a responsibility to, in essence, manage our own stress, but we also have a responsibility as pastors to help manage the stress of others, not only at a pastoral level, but at a policy level, which is why the Diocese of Central Florida banner is behind me. And so the content of this video is going to have to do with some recommendations and implications for policies. Consider this particular video an update from the last piece of communication that was sent to you just last week around creating a network of care, to which I will refer in the video today. First of all, where I would like to begin, which is where most of the questions are, and that has to do with public services of worship. You may have heard, because this has been available online in several places, including it's been republished by a priest on CF Cleric, the letter from the Presiding Bishop. What that letter says is, last week I stated publicly my support for bishops who, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, decide, quote, for a designated period of time to cancel in-person gatherings for public worship, unquote. He goes on to say, I write now concerning the need to suspend in-person gatherings for public worship in most contexts during the sacred time of Holy Week and Easter Day. Because this is a global health crisis, the principles in this letter apply throughout the Episcopal Church. What that means for us is that the wisest counsel I can offer is to follow the lead of the Presiding Bishop, suspend public acts of worship that gather us particularly beyond the safe distance that has been recommended for each other, 6 feet. And if that causes you to say, no, we're not going to gather together, then definitely you should not. We've already been talking about creative ways to be able to have church without meeting in the building. And I know it's a huge sacrifice for all of us, myself included, to not be available to preach and preside on Easter Sunday. That's my Sunday morning to be at the cathedral. We host visitors literally from around the world. I'm involved in personal prayer ministry during communion distribution from people who really are in desperate need of someone who will pray with them and for them. I grieve for the opportunity that will not happen as a result of these decisions. But it seems to me that the commitment that we make, both to care and to serve, mandate that we follow through with the recommendation the Presiding Bishop has offered. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't find other ways to do things. I'm hearing some incredible ideas about the way churches are finding ways to offer communion without a major Sunday morning gathering. One priest I know, Jim Spencer at St. Peter the Fisherman, has created, in essence, drive-through, where you pull up right in front of the front door. He is going to be there with a deacon. They will have handed out a handout that will be available for people. They will go through a brief liturgy together, and I'm meaning each car, and then he will go and offer to each one in the car the pre-intincted wafer. And then the next car drives up. And he is willing to do that over the course of several hours, over the course of several days, over the course of a week. Father Tom Seitz has come up with the idea of buying an FM transmitter and setting up something outside with everybody in their cars, like a drive-in church, where they all witness in front of him, tuning in to an FM station, the service, and then again, he and others will go through the parking lot with people still in their cars, receiving pre-intincted wafers. There are lots of ideas, and all of those are now being shared and shared freely on CF Cleric. I would encourage you to go there. We are also going to be posting a whole series of links on an email that will also be distributed on CF Cleric for the resources that are being referenced in today's presentation. Now, with the fact that most people are going to begin to be home more and more and more, with schools closing, people not going to work, there are things that we have to think about. One has to do with what happens when people go home. What happens to parents who all of a sudden have their kids all the time and don't have the break that normal school might give them? What about people who are having to juggle work and children at home at the same time? What about people who don't know what to do with their children and can't miss work? All of those are things that we have to figure out ways to take care of each other so that we can continue to walk through this together. A part of what this is showing us is that we cannot operate as autonomous individuals. We really do have to find new and deeper ways to walk together. And a part of what being sequestered home, even if we are not sheltering in place in the way that is presently being asked of people in some of our other cities, is that tensions are going to arise. Quite honestly, where people I know are thinking is, oh, but if that's a home where there is spousal abuse, where children are being hurt and mistreated, where people are escaping into drugs and alcohol, pornography, overspending online, to be able to deal with the stress, we more than ever have to remain in contact with the people in these families to figure out what we can do. A part of what we'll be posting online are hotline for domestic abuse, assistance to try to think about how we might be able to serve families better in the midst of these demands. This is not just a time when, mom and pop and two happy children can be, sit and play Monopoly all day. That's going to get old. And therefore, to find ways that we can support each other in the midst of not just the okay scenarios, but the worst case scenarios is going to be right in front of us very, very soon. The other group of people that comes to mind for me in the midst of this are the people who are being furloughed, that's the term, not fired, but furloughed from their jobs. What about people who are going to need help in terms of paying apartment rent or making a car payment? You see, particularly if the government comes out with a self-help check of some kind, $1,000 I understand is being proposed, there are some of us who really don't need that $1,000. We're going to get by just fine without it. Oh, sure, most of us could use the money. But the fact of the matter is, it's not urgent in the same way it's going to be urgent for some. What if churches pooled some of those funds, should they come in, and then make them available to people in their congregations or in their communities? Because if we don't do that and people start being kicked out of their apartments because they can't pay their rent, have their cars confiscated so that they can no longer go to work, you see the snowballing effect of this kind of economic crisis will only make matters worse for all of us if we don't now begin to think of how can we take care of the people in our churches and in our communities who, because of this upheaval, are in the greatest risk. We do need each other. We live in a time of hoarding. We live in a time where people are watching out for themselves and are driven by fear. It is our call to operate in a way that is courageously selfless, so that we become a group of people in our communities that are marked by courage, by generosity, by kindness, not just for ourselves, but also for other people as well. This is an opportunity that we could use because people need to be a real witness for the gospel in ways that have not been asked of us in the past. Also begin to think about the fact that if you're going to go online, do your people have access to that? Does there need to be training for them about how to follow a live streamed service? or other things that you might want to do to make your services available to people. One of the links that we're posting is a link on what to do and how to set up doing live feed for your local church, so that sermons, prayer times, things like that, methods of communication can strengthen the bonds that we have with each other. This, in fact, can be a time of enormous creativity, of men and women who rise to the occasion and say, we will serve the people that God sends our way. But it means proactivity on our part now. I remember one priest saying to me, oh, if people are in trouble, they'll give me a call. But the fact of the matter is that more often than not, the people who are in trouble don't call, particularly if they're ashamed of the things that are happening in their home or with their finances that they don't want other people to know. We will have to be proactive in caring for these people and wondering, well, we haven't heard from so-and-so. Haven't seen him in church in 3 weeks. I wonder what's going on. It always points to something. And lastly, be sure to continue to make opportunities for people to be able to give, to pay their pledges as far as is possible, to keep things afloat, so that particularly in the absence of Sunday morning services, you're still finding ways and setting things up for people to continue to be faithful givers, so that again, our churches don't run into financial trouble because we aren't creating enough opportunities for people to be able to support the life of the church. Let's find a way to do this together. Let's find a way to support one another. We want to be out and about as much as possible, because we are a people who, even in the midst of this chaos, still know the presence of Christ. We have an eternal gift to give. I look forward to seeing how God will teach us and how we can give in new ways. Thank you.